Yo, what's going on guys, it is Foxy here, welcome back to a brand new video and another episode of the F1 debate for you guys today here on the channel. Today, we're going to be discussing the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, as you can see, everything behind me is completely different. I have moved house and everything is a mess right now. So, apologies for that. It'll be the same for a while, but it is what it is. Eventually, I'll get it all sorted and less messy like that bag over there. But for now, you just got to do what you've got to do in it. So if you enjoy the video though, drop a like, subscribe if you're new around here as well. Let's get straight into the Dutch Grand Prix and talk all about it basically. What did I think of the race? For me, it was definitely the best race of the season. I really enjoyed it. The chaos with the rain, it was just absolute chaos. Basically at the start and at the finish and then that mid-piece drag. But it still ended up with a Red Bull victory after all of it. Can we just have one race, please, where Red Bull just don't win? But nonetheless, though, it was a great race. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, lap one, it's a dry start, and I'm thinking it's going to be a dry race. And then it starts absolutely chucking it down with rain. And then we had, sort of the mid-piece, and then more rain, which literally monsooned it. And I will give some credit to the FIA, but I'll do that a little bit later. So, first things first, qualifying. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys. I didn't watch qualifying. Not because I wasn't interested, specifically because I was moving into my house. So I wasn't actually able to access my TV and watch it. Of course, I did quickly catch the highlights that they put on their YouTube channel to try and just get myself up to speed a little bit. And from what I saw, again, it was another wet-ish quali and then converted into a dry one of Verstappen, just put in a lap that just put everyone in the dust as per usual. And he took pole position, of course. A couple of shocks in there, like Hamilton getting knocked out in Q2. Bit disappointing. Obviously, he was blocked by Tsunoda on his fastest lap. And just couldn't really get that clean run in that he needed to get himself into Q3. Once again, Sergio Perez with yet another woeful qualifying performance. I don't really know what to say anymore. Like, I tried my best to defend Perez because I think he's a really good driver, but I just feel like anybody that's in the Red Bull second driver seat, you just basically, you're there and you're not going to have any treatment that will help you. You're not going to have a car that will develop in your direction. Max is the best. Max is the leader. Max is this. You're nothing. You're just there because we have to fill two seats. If we couldn't, we wouldn't. That's basically what I feel like that number 2 seat is. Now, don't get me wrong. Look, I'm not going to go on these conspiracy theories, right, and say that they built this car just for Max and they do this just for Max and the strategy thing was just for Max. Well, maybe the strategy thing wasn't, but the problem you've got is if you're in that Red Bull sort of program and you get promoted to the Red Bull to join up alongside Verstappen, you need to be level / beating him straight away to have any opportunity of basically, getting in front of Max. The only other way that you're going to be able to beat Max Verstappen head-to-head in that Red Bull car is if you match his driving style, because the car will develop around him, and you are better than Max at his driving style. And obviously, some people are completely different. Some people like it when there's just a fully balanced car. Some drivers are happy for the car to step out a bit of the rear. They've got better control of that sector. Some are actually happy when the front nose doesn't turn in. They like a little bit of understeer in there because they want to put in a bit more lock, knowing that the rear end will stay with them and they can chuck it into those corners. Yes, it'll be a little bit lazy at the front, but it suits them quite well. I'm pretty sure, I think Vettel in 2020, when he had his horrible final season for Ferrari, I'm pretty sure that was the car that, I could be wrong, I can't remember Vettel's perks and what he was good at and what he wasn't good at. But I'm pretty sure it was a case of he likes a really controlled front rear end and then a little bit more of a lazier front end. And he didn't have that. He had a very unstable rear end and then he had a very good front end and a very bad rear end, and it was the complete wrong balance for him, whereas Leclerc obviously was able to cope better in that circumstance. And if you're not at that level that Verstappen is able to occupy, let's just say Verstappen likes a front end that just goes into every corner, and whatever the back end does, it doesn't matter, I'll control it. If you can't do that, and you can't adjust and develop your style to do that, and potentially slightly other ones, you're in no man's land. Because at that point, obviously, Verstappen's going to have his momentum from just winning, and constantly beating you. You're going to then have the sort of demotivation from constantly losing to Verstappen and then trying to find a way to beat him. You'll have the pressure because you're, not achieving your set initial target, aka beat your teammate. And then, of course, you're out the door then. And at that point, if you've got a car that's a championship winning car, aka what Red Bull have, well, the only way that you're going to be able to optimize your championship winning car is, guess what? Optimize and build it around the driver that is performing better. If Perez came into that team in 2021 and just shone and was able to beat Verstappen constantly and was ahead in the championship versus Lewis Hamilton, well then straight away you're going to have a car that they're going to go, hang on a minute, who's more likely to win me a championship this year? Sergio Perez. Right, what does Sergio Perez want? Let's upgrade and optimize around Perez here, because he's the man that's going to do this for us. And that's how it is. Would Red Bull maybe give more support to Verstappen and say, well, what's your problem? Like, why is it not working? And he'd be saying, the front end doesn't work or whatever. Maybe he does. Obviously, we're never going to know that. I don't want to think it is that way, but it may as well, it could be. So that's my little piece on Sergio Perez in all of this. And yeah, another poor qualifying. It was a great quali though for the McLarens, Norris up there in the front row, Russell P3, Albon somehow getting that Williams into P4 on a track I didn't think would even work for him, but it did. So fair play to him. He's been outstanding this season. And that brings me on to my next piece. Mr. Logan Sargeant, the silent failure at Williams. How long are you going to leave this now before we genuinely start having conversations about Logan Sargeant? Because, unfortunately for me, I just feel like Sargeant is not performing well enough to warrant being in a Formula 1 seat. Granted, yes, he is coming up against Alex Albon, who's currently on the form of his life at the moment, but it goes back to Nick de Vries. It goes back to, Nicholas Latifi when he was in the Williams car. You need to be up for it every single time. And unfortunately, he's just not. He's been out-qualified, I'm pretty sure, in every single race so far this season. Whenever we talk about drivers performing well, we're only ever talking about Albon. He's the only one that's getting that team points. Sargeant finally got his Williams into Q3 for the first time in the Dutch Grand Prix, and then he crashed. You can't be making those mistakes, and he crashed in the race as well. Again, did anybody else crash in the race? No. If you go to Alex Albon, he did the entire first stint shower on dry tyres, and he kept it on the track. And I think he only made like 1 or 2 pit stops, obviously pitting for another set of dries, and then go forth. But he did something like 40 plus laps on a set of the soft compound tyres and didn't pit, when it initially started raining. So you've got to ask the question, well, where does the limitations of going, hang on a minute, if we're looking at Nick de Vries this way, we need to look at Logan Sargeant this way. Not in the way of, right, you're out the door, bye-bye, let's get the next one in. But no one seems to be asking the questions. We've all been slating Nick de Vries, but the reason that we've been doing that is because Red Bull have been so public about it. That's just Red Bull's nature. With Williams, however, there's not been any of that. Now, maybe they are just in full support of Sargeant and saying, look, this is your rookie year. Just get yourself, up to speed with Formula 1. You've never raced at these circuits. Albon, yes, he has raced at these circuits, so he'll have the experience. Get yourself up to speed, and then eventually, as my alarm goes off, eventually you'll be able to match Alex then in the second season. If you're struggling then, you're in a lot of trouble. So what about the race though? Well, obviously we started the Grand Prix with, well, literally dry conditions for about 10 seconds before it started pouring down with rain. And we saw all the drivers initially, well, this is the thing. Everybody stayed out for at least a lap, to the end of lap 2, whereas Sergio Perez just came in straight away, bang, into lap 1. And it was the right call from him. He absolutely flew up the order. But there was some drivers, like both Mercedes cars, Norris, for example. I mean, Albon just stayed out the whole time, but they stayed out way too long. And I don't really know why, but they just did. And it just mixed the whole grid order up till basically, well, the rest of the race, really. Of course, as the Inters took their play, we saw a couple of overtakes, here or there, for drivers getting back up the order. One of them being Max Verstappen, who forced Gasly off the track. For some reason, they decided not to call that as an unfair overtake and wasn't Porsche pushing him off the track. As you'll see, from this analysis now. So this is really the only incident that I wanted to discuss for this, and it was Verstappen's move on Pierre Gasly on lap 6 of the Grand Prix. Lovely, it tells you that. On the Interseer. And this is where I just get really confused about racing and about basically what's the point. I just don't find it that well balanced at all. So I'll play it in full speed here. And as they go in towards turn 3 here, Verstappen goes around and he takes the place. Now annoyingly, it doesn't show the position from Pierre Gasly. The issue that I've got is right here. So Verstappen right now is going in towards the hairpin. Absolutely fair enough. Okay. Now, because he's taking the higher line, he basically, the low line, sorry. In this circumstance, he actually needs to basically, to get it right, you dive it in low, and then, because you do that, you basically take more speed to the point where you're a little bit ahead then of your opponent, and your opponent sees that that basically road is not there anymore, and then that guy on the low line basically gives him a little bit of a squeeze. Here, though, look at this, right? So they go in towards the hairpin now. They are side by side. There's no doubt about that. And if Verstappen had fully locked at this point here, we wouldn't be having a single issue, right? Obviously not. No. But the issue that we've got is right here. So, you're turning into the corner, you're turning in, and right about there, Pierre Gasly at this point, he's still got his front wing basically level with Verstappen's front tyre, and he's been forced completely off the track. Now, both David Croft and Karun Chandhok, when commentating on this race, literally mentioned about how Verstappen was going to have to give that place back, and then even got surprised when he didn't have to give the place back. Or even, if you look at this here, Gasly's actually 7/100ths of a second, if so, 6/100ths of a second ahead of Verstappen. Obviously, that's just on that frame there, and of course, they won't update that, properly. But he's there, he's still there, and he's been forced off of the track. Verstappen's given him no room whatsoever, and yet this wasn't a time penalty for doing this. You guys can voice your opinions. I think I've said my piece. I have no idea how that's not a 5-second penalty at all. No idea. And it's just going to let Verstappen, it'll basically give him the memo of, oh, I'm allowed to do that then. Whereas everybody else that I've seen that have been doing these type of things have been penalised for it. I don't think that's fair at all. Should have been a penalty for Verstappen. But yeah, less said and done about that. And of course, we saw them then swap to the dry tyres. Piastri, the first man to do it, setting some purple sectors, calling everybody in. And then Verstappen was called in before Sergio Perez to retake the lead of the Dutch Grand Prix. Controversial? I mean, yes, because Perez didn't even know. He was just told to box when he was told to. Verstappen was told to box when he was told to. It didn't really make any sense to me. I know Verstappen had gained a massive chunk of time in the wet conditions, but come on, we moved. So they did that. It was a little bit of a stagnant sort of second phase of the race. There was a lot of overtaking. Norris and Hamilton were sort of simultaneously moving their way up the order. And of course, they had the lifeline from the Logan Sargent crash in order to help them close back up to the field. And then it got a bit stagnated as there was a couple of drivers not really making that many overtakes. Norris and Hamilton got stuck behind Yuki Tsunoda, who put in a brilliant performance until, of course, Norris pitted. Then Hamilton pitted, and of course they got in front then. And of course we saw some great fighting at the front. Alonso with some brilliant overtaking throughout the Grand Prix, like his moves on Norris and also on Russell at the very start of the race. And he was just super consistent this weekend, and it was great to sort of see him get a bit of form back. As well for Pierre Gasly, what a race from him. He was so good. He wasn't quick out there, mind. In terms of overall race pace, he wasn't the fastest, but what did he do right? Execute all the strategies correctly. The only time he made that mistake was when he got that 5-second penalty. I can't remember what it was for, but I think it was speeding in the pit lane, I think. What was it? I can't remember. I'm going to go with that. But, of course, when Perez got his 5-second penalty, it got him onto the podium. So, you can't fault it. He's had an epic race weekend. So, of course, we then knew it was going to rain again, and we were sort of like, is it going to rain again? Is it going to just be lighter, which we thought it was? Is it going to be heavy? Is it going to be, do we have to go into the inters or the wets? And then all of a sudden, I can't remember whose team radio it was, and it was just, yeah, we've got rain incoming. It's going to be heavier than the start of the race shower. And you're just thinking, Okay, yeah, we'll have some of that. You rub your hands, rub them, hope that Verstappen crashes so someone else wins. Didn't happen. It was actually Perez that spun and crashed, and well, he rejoined, but Alonso was able to take second place, and of course, it absolutely chucked it down at that point. And we saw the red flag come out. And this is where I want to praise the FIA, actually. I've been, and many fans have been, very critical of the FIA for what they do, basically just handling the wet weather. But this time around, they handled it perfectly. They pulled out the red flag when the red flag was meant it needed to be pulled out. They restarted the race when it needed to be restarted at the right time. Maybe about 5 or so minutes, a bit too late in my opinion. Probably could have gone a little bit earlier. Everyone was on the inters. They got going and we got the race done fairly. So fair play to the FIA for that one. You can't fault it. So yeah, credit where it's due for them on that one. And of course, we had a little restart then and the end of the race. Now, what did... that's pretty much my race recap really on everything. Overall, I thought it was, like I said, it was a great race. But let's have a little conversation about the teams. Red Bull, first things first. I mean, there's not really much to say about them. We've already talked really heavily about them. They had a great race. Podium for win for Verstappen. That's 9 in a row for him now. It's an unprecedented, target. At the end of the day, no other team out there is capable of defeating Red Bull in the hands of Max Verstappen. And you've got to give him, you do have to give credit to Verstappen. At the end of the day, if you look at Sergio Perez, that guy's been, he's been awful. The McLarens, the Mercedes, the Aston Martins are consistently beating him. Whether that's in qualifying or in the race trim, they're beating Sergio Perez. Whereas, in the hands of Verstappen, you need a team that has a championship winning car. Yes, of course, Red Bull have got, let's just say, half a second advantage over the rest of the field. But it's Verstappen, like I said at the very start of this with regards to Perez, they've optimised their half a second advantage per lap with tailing it around their best driver at the moment in the team, and that's Verstappen, hence why he's the one making the difference on track. So fair play to him. Will he go on and beat the record of the most consecutive wins in Formula One history? Yeah, in my opinion, I think he'll beat it. I think he'll probably get 12. I think will be his mark, and then he'll be defeated. I hope. So that's kind of where I think it's going to be at. But yeah, that's pretty much where Red Bull are at. Aston Martin, great weekend from them. Great recovery. I think they were optimised quite heavily from the conditions, but they got the strategy right. Race pace from Alonso was great. You can't fault it. Ferrari, they were woeful this weekend. My God, were they bad. Obviously, Sainz, I know he finished, if you're talking like the battle for second in the championship, second in the Taylor order of 4 teams, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin and Ferrari. But they were really, really poor. And I initially tweeted out saying Leclerc was having easily his worst performance I've ever seen in his Ferrari career. Until obviously I found out that he had floor damage from the contact with Piastri at the start. So that, would have hampered him quite heavily. So yeah, shame about that one. But yeah, apart from that, they really weren't that good. They didn't have great race pace. The Alpine was easily faster than them this weekend, and that's a worry for Ferrari if you've got Alpine that are quicker than you. No disrespect to Alpine, but you should be kind of beating them, McLaren, they were quick, but they were too draggy. We saw that with the fight with Tsunoda. Norris, even with DRS, couldn't do anything. And that's kind of where it stands really with them. Mercedes, my team, my wonderful Mercedes. They were rubbish this weekend. The thing is that team, that car was literally constantly just covered with raw, untamed potential that they just threw away after lap 1 by just not pitting. Now with Russell, I understand, pit them on lap 2 at least. But with Hamilton, he's in like 15th or 14th odd place. It's absolutely chucking it down, and it's extremely horrific weather. Box him. Be like, what are you going to do? You're going to be either 16th or you be last. And the fact that they left him out for nearly the longest, well, he ended up being last. Mate, if they did box him at the same time as Perez did, he would have easily been in second place. And although Verstappen may have overtaken him, and probably would have had, Hamilton would have easily got a podium. And, their race pace, that Mercedes car was actually very, very quick. especially in the hands of Hamilton when he was getting up the order. He was passing all the drivers, same time that Norris was doing it. As soon as he got into free air and Norris didn't have any, one to try and attack, Hamilton gained like 5 seconds on Norris because, of course, Norris got the undercut quite heavily, gained 5 seconds on Norris, passed Norris quite simply, and then absolutely breezed past the rest. And shout out to George Russell, though, by the way, for that save into the right-hander. When he put a wheel on the grass, I literally had my balls in my stomach at that point because I thought he was going to bin it and collect Lewis Hamilton with him. Easily one of the best saves you'll ever see in Formula 1. That's going in all the montages now for the best save in Formula 1 history because that was class. But yeah, Mercedes kind of want to... Their strategy is getting very questionable this season, Mercedes. Twice in qualifying we've seen the two have miscommunicational errors, which has led to... Well, in Spain, they crashed into each other. And in Belgium, in the sprint, I want to say, they completely threw away everything that they did. And then here again, they threw away the strategy quite horribly with both their cars. And I don't really know. They need to have a little bit of a rethink over their strategy in the races because it's not quite up to standards that they used to have back in the day. Who else are we going to talk about? Alpine. Well, it was a great weekend for Gasly. Ocon, not so much, but, he was still pretty decent in his races, so fair play to him. Obviously, Williams in the hands of Albon was electric, which is great. You need that progress, and I'm going to be happy that they could see that. But that's because they've got a great driver in their ranks. At the end of the day, if they had someone like Sargent, who was actually better in terms of performance, Williams probably wouldn't be there in the back marker fight really anymore. They'd be putting that pressure on the likes of your Alfa Romeos, your Alpines even, for that example. They do have that potential. They're just not able to exploit it. And then the rest of the grid was kind of really just... There was no real outlier. Tsunoda, I'll give him the credit. He had a great weekend. And big shame as well to Daniel Ricciardo for breaking his hand, I think it was, in the FP3 crash. Really, really upsetting to see him breaking his hand. But it's a great opportunity now for Liam Lawson to get that opportunity to show that he deserves an AlphaTauri seat for the formidable future. And he's got some time to do that. Decent race from him, considering even during the race itself, he was still asking the engineers what some buttons actually meant because he's never sat in a Formula 1 car before. Well, he has. He's done FP1 sessions probably, but he's never sat in that car before. And now he's got probably the Italian Grand Prix and the Singapore Grand Prix. I think even the Japanese Grand Prix will be a big stretch for Ricciardo. I personally don't think he'll be back in the car till to the Qatar Grand Prix, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one. And that is pretty much now going to lead us to the next Grand Prix. Speaking of the Italian Grand Prix, that is the next one. What do I think is going to happen? Red Bull will win the race because they have unlimited potential where they're just going to batter everybody. I think Ferrari will get a podium next time around. I think Ferrari will be the team to beat between them, Mercedes, McLaren and Aston Martin. Ferrari seem to have a very good car when it comes to low drag. We saw that in Baku when they managed to get pole position with Leclerc twice in the sprint and also in the main race. And in Belgium as well. Again, Leclerc picking up that podium and holding off Lewis Hamilton. I think Mercedes and McLaren and Aston... probably maybe not so much Aston, I would have thought, but I think Mercedes and McLaren in particular will probably struggle. Their cars tend to be quite draggy, both of them together. But Mercedes did have a very good low drag setup at the Belgian Grand Prix, where without the DRS, they were the fastest in the speed trap. So maybe if they tailor... Because this track in particular, Belgium's different. You're either tailoring towards a bit more top speed, which will hurt you in the middle sector, or you do a bit more in the middle sector, but it hurts you in the first and the third sector. So it's about balancing, whereas this is just you want your top speed. But I still think Mercedes will struggle. I think they'll be, obviously within that fight. But I think the biggest problem as well with Mercedes is that they struggle a lot with high-speed cornering. The rear end is just not really with them at the moment. And I think especially through the Lesmos and through Ascari and even Parabolica, to an extent, I just think that the car won't be stable enough for them, and I just think they'll struggle. I don't know, I just feel like this is going to be a bad weekend for Mercedes. I don't know why, I just don't really see it. And McLaren, well, at the end of the day, we haven't even seen them bring a low drag specification rear wing to this season. So, again, they might be draggy depending if they do bring a rear wing. Now, in my personal opinion, I believe they'll bring a brand new rear wing. There's no way that they won't, but I think all teams will have a brand newish type of low spec rear wing, but whether they perform, it's another matter. Alpine will probably be struggling, I think, this weekend as well. I got hiccups as well at the same time as doing this. So professional, by the way. Williams, expect them to have their strongest weekend of the season. It's a low drag circuit. What to expect? They'll be flying this weekend. AlphaTauri, I think, will struggle. Haas, they might do well because it's a low drag circuit and they've still got the Ferrari power unit in the back of their car as well. So maybe watch out for them. Same with Alfa Romeo, who have just actually released their livery, which looks beautiful, by the way. And of course, I've probably missed another team in there, but it is what it is. But guys, that is it for the F1 debate for the Dutch Grand Prix. I will see you guys next time for the Italian Grand Prix F1 debate next week, where you'll probably still see my setup looking as messy as it does now, whilst I sort out my house. But for now, I will see you guys next time. Take care all, guys. Peace.